The first time the royal council called Josie unfit to stand beside the alpha heirs, Vito bit a lord's ceremonial glove and Theon climbed directly into her arms. It was not, Josie thought, the dignified beginning anyone had planned for her first formal appearance as Alpha Queen. The Great Hall had been prepared for the twins' succession acknowledgement, every banner perfectly hung, every noble arranged according to rank. Tristan stood beside her beneath the carved royal crest, composed enough that only Josie noticed the tension in his jaw. Lord Garrick stepped forward. "Your Majesty, no one questions the Queen's affection for the princes." Tristan's expression hardened. Josie touched 2 fingers lightly against his wrist. "Let him speak." Garrick continued. "But affection does not settle succession law. Her Majesty has no wolf. She has no blood relation to either heir. The council must consider whether granting her maternal authority over 2 alpha princes creates a vulnerability in the succession." Murmurs traveled through the hall. Wolfless. Josie had heard the word used as an insult since childhood. Servant. Nothing. Unworthy. Queen had not erased any of them. Tristan stepped forward. "My wife, Tristan." She said his name quietly, but he stopped. Josie faced Garrick herself. "What exactly is the council requesting?" The Lord seemed surprised she had asked. "The princes must complete the acknowledgement without your assistance. Their independence from an unrelated guardian should be demonstrated before the council." Josie looked toward the twins. Vito was already glaring at everyone with the fierce suspicion of a child who believed most ceremonies existed specifically to inconvenience him. Theon stood beside his brother, quieter, studying the unfamiliar faces. A court attendant approached them. Vito immediately backed away. The attendant tried again, reaching for his hand. Vito slapped it aside. Several nobles shifted uncomfortably. "Your Highness," the attendant coaxed. Vito responded by seizing the edge of Lord Garrick's embroidered ceremonial glove when the noble came too close and sinking his small teeth into it. A shocked sound swept through the hall. "Vito." Josie crossed the floor. The boy released Garrick immediately and reached for her. Behind him, Theon's composure finally broke. He hurried after his brother and wrapped both arms around Josie's leg. She crouched. Neither child needed an alpha command. Neither needed force. She rested one hand between Vito's shoulders and offered the other to Theon. "I'm here." Vito's breathing slowed first. Theon slipped his hand into hers. Silence spread across the chamber. Josie could feel what everyone was thinking. Proof. Some saw proof that the children belonged with her. Others saw proof that they depended upon her too much. Josie refused both interpretations. She rose and looked at Tristan. "They're frightened." His eyes met hers. That was enough. "The ceremony is finished for today," Josie said. Garrick stiffened. "Your Majesty, the acknowledgement will not be performed by frightening 2 children until they behave correctly for an audience. They are heirs. They are also children." Tristan came to stand beside her. No one challenged him when he ordered the hall cleared. Later, inside the family wing, Vito had recovered enough to attack a wooden horse with considerably more enthusiasm than the toy deserved. Theon sat against Josie's side, examining one of her sleeves. Tristan paced before the fireplace. "I could end this tonight." Josie knew exactly what he meant. One decree, one Alpha King's command. No council member would dare question her again. "And tomorrow?" she asked. They would still obey. "That wasn't my question." He stopped. Josie glanced toward the twins before lowering her voice. "If you silence Garrick, does that make his argument disappear? Or does it simply teach whoever agrees with him to stop saying it where we can hear?" Tristan's gaze darkened. "They questioned your right to our family. And if someone is using that question for something larger, I want them speaking." His expression changed. Not agreement yet. Attention. Josie had learned to recognize the difference. "The ceremony was supposed to confirm Vito and Theon publicly as your heirs," she continued. "Instead, the argument centered on whether I have authority over them. Because Garrick is an arrogant traditionalist. Perhaps." She replayed the hall in her mind. The angry faces. The whispers. The officials watching the twins cling to her. And one detail that had felt wrong. When Vito lost control, everyone watched him. Tristan waited. Except one man. Josie stood. The Lord beside Garrick. He barely looked at Vito or me. What was he watching? Josie remembered the polished table beside the council clerks and the documents prepared for the succession acknowledgement. More specifically, She remembered the small golden object resting beside them. The royal succession seal. Tristan went very still. Across the room, Vito knocked the wooden horse over and laughed triumphantly. Theon finally released Josie's sleeve and went to investigate. Josie watched both boys. This was no longer about whether a former servant deserved a crown. Someone in that hall had been interested in the machinery surrounding two future kings. Tristan moved toward the door. Josie caught his hand. No arrests. Josie, if we're wrong, we create enemies. If we're right, arresting the first suspicious man tells the person behind him that we've noticed. His fingers tightened around hers. You want to wait. I want them to believe today worked. Understanding slowly entered his expression. They wanted the court to see a wolfless woman standing where she did not belong. Fine. For the moment, Josie would let them. She looked toward Vito and Theon again. She had once believed belonging was something powerful people could give her and take away whenever they wished. She knew better now. But somewhere inside the palace, someone was testing whether that was true for her sons as well. And Josie intended to discover why. By morning, Josie had decided that suspicion was useful only if it could survive being tested. She did not return to the council chamber. Instead, she stayed where the previous day's argument had begun, with Vito and Theon. Vito was attempting to climb onto a chair he had already been removed from twice. Theon sat on the nursery carpet arranging carved animals into a line, studying each one before deciding where it belonged. You know that's going to end badly, Josie told Vito. He grinned at her and climbed higher. Josie caught him just before the chair tipped. The nursery door opened. A royal attendant entered carrying a leather document case. Your Majesty, records for the postponed succession acknowledgement. Josie nodded toward the table. Leave them there. The attendant crossed the room. Theon stopped playing. Josie noticed because he rarely reacted quickly to strangers. He watched first. Now he moved backward. The attendant passed near him, and Theon pressed against Josie's skirts. It's all right, she murmured. The man bowed and turned to leave. Theon suddenly reached toward his coat. His fingers closed around something near the attendant's side before the man continued through the doorway. Theon. The boy opened his fist. A broken piece of red sealing wax rested in his palm. Josie crouched. Stamped into it was part of a familiar design. The royal seal. Almost. She carried the fragment to the window, turning it beneath the morning light. The impression resembled Tristan's seal closely enough to fool someone glancing at it, but one edge of the crest was wrong. She remembered the Lord watching the succession seal. Coincidence was still possible. Twice made coincidence less comfortable. Josie reviewed the documents the attendant had delivered. Most concerned ceremonial procedure. Then she found a copied decree defining temporary guardianship of royal heirs. She read it twice. A phrase had changed. The version Tristan had approved placed temporary authority under the direct oversight of the reigning monarch. This copy allowed authority to pass under council supervision when the monarch was judged unable to act independently. Tristan arrived before noon. Josie placed the wax beside the document. His face changed as she explained. Bring me the attendant. No. Josie, he carried counterfeit royal wax into our children's nursery. Or someone placed it in his case. Or on his clothing. If he's a courier, arresting him gives us nothing. Tristan stared at the altered decree. Someone forged this. Someone wants us to notice something eventually. I want to know what they expect to happen before. We do. His gaze lifted sharply. Josie tapped the altered guardianship clause. Yesterday they questioned my authority over Vito and Theon. Today a document appears describing how authority over royal heirs can be transferred. The room seemed suddenly colder. Tristan looked toward the nursery door. What do you want to do? That question mattered more than an order. Josie folded the copied decree and returned it to the case exactly as she had found it. Nothing. His eyebrows rose. Publicly, she added. Understanding began to form in his eyes. If someone believes I'm the weakness in this family, we should stop trying to convince them they're wrong. Meaning, Josie thought of every courtier who had watched Tristan stand beside her yesterday. Everyone who knew the Alpha King would tear apart any challenge to his wife. As long as they believed that, they would remain cautious. She needed them careless. I need the court to believe yesterday changed something between us. Tristan's expression hardened immediately. Josie, they already think a wolfless former servant doesn't belong beside you. Give them something easier to believe. You want me to turn against you. I want you to look as though you're beginning to doubt me." For several seconds he said nothing. Then Vito shouted from the nursery, followed by the crash of another overturned toy. Josie looked toward the sound. Someone was constructing a path toward taking those boys from her. To find them, she would give them what they wanted to see. For now, for 3 days, Josie let the palace believe the Alpha King had begun to regret his queen. Tristan stopped waiting for her before council sessions. At meals attended by nobles, he addressed her with formal courtesy instead of the quiet familiarity everyone had grown accustomed to seeing. When Garrick challenged her judgment concerning the twins, Tristan did not silence him. The whispers came almost immediately. Josie heard them in corridors that became suspiciously quiet whenever she approached. The servant queen had overreached. The king had finally understood the danger. Perhaps the council had been right. Each rumor struck an old place inside her. Once she had thought healed, that was precisely why the deception worked. People believed what they already wanted to believe. Only behind the doors of their private rooms did Tristan allow his anger to show. "I dislike this plan. You've mentioned that. I particularly dislike allowing Garrick to speak to you as though you wandered into the palace yesterday, carrying laundry." Josie almost smiled. "Then try looking less murderous when he does it." Tristan gave her a look suggesting that request might exceed even an Alpha King's authority. She spread the copied guardianship decree across the table between them. "If everyone believes you'll destroy anyone who threatens me, whoever altered this will stay hidden. And if they believe you're losing my protection, they'll become confident. Or dangerous. Those may be the same thing." Tristan's hand covered hers. For a moment, neither of them spoke. His anger was not what worried her. His fear was. "I failed to recognize danger inside my own family once," he said finally. "I will not do it again." Josie turned her hand beneath his and intertwined their fingers. "Then don't protect me by deciding everything alone." His eyes lifted to hers. "Trust me enough to let me see what they do next." The following afternoon gave her another piece. A court official arrived at the family wing to review the twins' revised ceremonial schedule. Vito immediately attempted to escape the fitting arranged for him, dragging half a ceremonial sash behind him. Fian remained beside Josie, quiet, watching. Then his attention fixed on the official's coat. A small silver clasp fastened the man's outer garment near his shoulder. Fian reached toward it. Josie gently caught his wrist before he could pull it free. "What did you see?" The boy touched the clasp again. Josie looked closer. A tiny engraved symbol marked its surface. She had seen that shape before. Not on the false seal. Near the succession archive. The recognition was incomplete, not evidence, and she forced herself not to turn it into more than it was. Still, she remembered. The official finished his work and departed without incident. That evening Josie compared what she knew. The altered guardianship language required access to council documents. The counterfeit wax suggested access to royal administrative materials. Now an insignia associated with the records offices had appeared on someone moving freely through the family wing. Different pieces. No proof they belonged to the same hand. Yet, "We could investigate everyone wearing that clasp," Tristan said, "and announce exactly what we're looking for." He exhaled through his nose. "You've developed an alarming fondness for telling me not to arrest people. I'll try to find a more queenly hobby when this is over." That earned the smallest smile. Then it vanished. "What aren't you telling me?" Josie met his eyes. She had begun narrowing the possibilities, but suspicion was not proof. Naming someone too early could turn Tristan's caution into action. "I'll tell you every step I take," she said. "But I won't give you a name until I have enough to defend it." His jaw tightened. Then he nodded. Trust, Josie realized, was sometimes much harder than protection. The next morning, the royal council assembled unexpectedly. Josie entered beside Tristan, maintaining the deliberate distance between them. Garrick was already standing. A document lay before him. "This petition," he announced, "concerns temporary guardianship of Princes Vito and Fian pending a formal determination of the Queen's fitness." Josie's heartbeat struck once hard. Across the chamber, Tristan did not look at her. Exactly as they had planned. Around them, several nobles watched with barely concealed anticipation. They believed the outsider was losing her place. Josie lowered her eyes as though the words had wounded her too deeply to answer. But inside, every instinct sharpened. Someone had stopped whispering. Someone had finally made a move. The petition was worse than Josie expected because almost none of it sounded cruel. Cruelty would have been easier to fight. Instead, Lord Garrick spoke of stability, precedent, and the welfare of the heirs. He never called Josie worthless. He never mentioned the kitchens where she had once worked. He simply built an argument in which every fact about her became evidence against her. The prince's dependence upon Her Majesty has now been witnessed by this council, Garrick said. Neither heir could complete the succession acknowledgement without her intervention. They were frightened, Josie replied. Precisely. Garrick turned toward the assembled nobles. Two future kings cannot become incapable of functioning whenever one unrelated guardian is absent. Unrelated. The word landed harder than Josie wanted it to. She looked toward Tristan. He remained seated, his expression deliberately unreadable. Their performance continued. Garrick requested a temporary evaluation. Vito and Theon would remain in the royal family wing, but Josie's contact with them would be suspended long enough for appointed caregivers to determine whether their attachment endangered their independence. No. Tristan's voice struck the chamber like a blade. Several counselors lowered their eyes. Josie saw the plan beginning to fracture. She stepped forward. I agree. Tristan looked at her. This time his surprise was real. So was the silence. Garrick recovered first. Your Majesty? I said I agree to a controlled separation. Tristan rose slowly. Josie. She held his gaze. They had planned weakness. They had not planned this. But the petition had given her something they needed. A reason for whoever was behind it to believe the court could legally place distance between her and the twins. Josie turned back to Garrick. The princes remain inside the family wing. Every caregiver assigned to them will be named in writing. Every person entering or leaving their rooms will be recorded. No relocation. No unscheduled visitors. Garrick hesitated. If this is truly about their welfare, Josie said, those conditions should present no difficulty. He could hardly object without revealing too much. Agreed. The separation began that afternoon. Vito did not understand. When Josie stopped outside the nursery instead of entering, he reached through the doorway toward her. She nearly broke immediately. Theon stood behind him, watching her with the quiet confusion that hurt even more. I'll see you soon, she promised. Vito protested loudly enough to echo down the corridor. Josie walked away anyway. By evening, reports arrived. Vito had refused 2 caregivers, thrown his supper, and attempted repeatedly to reach the door. Theon had been quieter. He would not sleep. One of the approved attendants finally discovered that he would lie down only after being given a small cloth carrying Josie's familiar scent from the nursery linens. Josie read that line twice. No law had taught him that. No title had demanded it. Whatever the council chose to call her, the boys already knew what she was to them. Tristan found her still holding the report. This ends now. No. There's suffering. I know. Then how can you ask me to continue? Josie folded the paper carefully because her hands had begun to shake. Because someone wanted this separation. She placed Garrick's petition beside the altered guardianship decree. Yesterday they wanted me declared unsuitable. Today they obtained exactly what they needed. Tristan stared at the documents. Josie pointed to the administrative requirements she had imposed. If anyone approaches the twins now, we have names, times, entry records. Understanding replaced anger, though not the pain beneath it. You turned their petition into surveillance. I turned their victory into a door they think we've opened. Late that night, another piece arrived. Josie examined the damaged copy of an archive record she had requested concerning guardianship procedures. The forged petition required knowledge of council law. The altered decree required access to succession records. But one notation referenced an older nursery protocol stored separately from ordinary council documents. Whoever had assembled the scheme knew both systems. Council archive, royal nursery records. Josie added that fact to everything she had already noticed. The false wax, the altered language, the silver insignia. The circle was narrowing. Still, she had no name she could prove. Not yet. A knock sounded. One of the guards assigned to the family wing entered. Your Majesty. Something in his expression made Josie stand. What happened? He held out the nightly access ledger. There is a problem with the nursery records. Josie took it. The entries showed every approved caregiver who had entered since the separation began. She checked them once. Then again. One section had been carefully removed. Not crossed out. Not corrected. Removed. Someone had taken an access record from inside the most closely watched wing of the palace. Tristan came to stand beside her. Josie looked down the corridor toward the nursery where Vito and Theon were sleeping without her. The separation had lasted less than a day, and someone had already used it. The missing entry gave Josie exactly what she had wanted and exactly what she feared. Someone inside the palace believed the separation had created an opportunity. By dawn, the removed section of the ledger had been recovered from the archive disposal stack, torn twice and marked for destruction among ordinary discarded records. Enough remained to reconstruct the entry. An authorization request, not to enter the nursery, to transfer custody. Josie carried the pieces into Tristan's study and arranged them beside the altered guardianship decree. Tristan read the surviving lines. His face became terrifyingly calm. They're preparing to remove my sons from the family wing. Not yet. That word is doing very little to reassure me. Josie pointed to the legal language connecting the documents. If the queen is declared unfit, temporary guardianship can pass elsewhere. But this provision goes further. She traced another surviving sentence. If the reigning alpha is considered unable to act independently because of personal attachment to the disputed guardian, the council can demand temporary oversight of the heirs. Tristan looked at her. They mean me. They need you angry. The realization settled between them. Every insult toward Josie, every challenge to her place, every demand involving Vito and Theon had offered Tristan the same temptation. Override the council and prove that his loyalty to his wife outweighed procedure. They want me to use my authority against them, he said. And then they'll argue that your judgment is compromised. His fist closed against the table. I could arrest Garrick before sunset, which might complete their argument for them. Tristan turned away. Josie understood his frustration because she shared it. Garrick had given them the petition. His faction had supplied the public pressure. Everything seemed to point toward him. Too neatly. They still had no proof that Garrick had altered the decree, produced the counterfeit seal, or removed the nursery record. Josie stared at the documents until the next move became clear. It frightened her more than any accusation had. At the afternoon council session, she requested permission to speak before Garrick could present another argument. I will not allow the princes to become weapons in a dispute over me. The chamber quieted. Tristan sat at the head of the council table. He knew what she intended now. Knowing did not make his expression easier to watch. Josie continued. Until the investigation into my fitness is concluded, I voluntarily relinquish temporary guardianship authority over Princes Vito and Theon. Even Garrick looked surprised. Whispers exploded around the chamber. Josie did not look at Tristan. If she did, she might lose the strength to finish. My position as queen will not be used to obstruct the council's examination. There. The surrender they had been waiting for. Garrick accepted almost too carefully. When Josie returned to the family wing, Vito and Theon were being escorted from the nursery for their afternoon meal. Vito saw her. His entire face changed. He ran. Josie. She caught him instinctively. For one dangerous second, she wanted to take both boys back into the nursery, close the doors, and tell every counselor in the kingdom to try removing them. Then Theon reached her. He took her hand without speaking. Josie knelt between them. Vito wrapped both arms around her neck. Theon pressed himself against her shoulder. She had chosen this. That knowledge did not make it hurt less. You have to go with them. Vito shook his head violently. Josie gently loosened his arms. Theon tightened his fingers around hers. She had to open them one by one. I am not leaving you, she whispered. But I need you to be brave for me. The attendants led them away. Vito kept looking backward. Theon did too. Josie remained where she was until they disappeared around the corridor. Tristan found her there. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, he said, You gave up the one thing they're accusing you of wanting. Power over the heirs. If this fails, I know. He stepped closer. This is not why I chose you. Josie looked at him. I know that too. That was what made the gamble possible. Once, losing a place in this palace would have meant losing proof that she mattered. Now she knew better. But knowing she belonged did not mean she could not lose the people she belonged to. Before nightfall, the answer came. A sealed administrative request reached the family wing. Because Josie had relinquished guardianship, the document requested authorization to move Vito and Theon from the palace to another protected royal residence while the council completed its inquiry. Josie read it without breathing. The request had been prepared that same afternoon. Someone had been waiting for her surrender. Tristan reached for the document. This is enough. No. They're trying to take them. And now we know they need them moved. Josie looked at the seal, the authorization chain, the carefully chosen legal language. The trap was closing, just not around the person who thought it was. She folded the request. Let them believe we're considering it. Tristan stared at her. Josie could still feel Theon's fingers being pulled from hers. Every instinct demanded that she end the game. Instead, she placed the transfer request beside the forged decree. Someone had finally taken the bait. Now she needed to discover who came to collect it. The transfer request gave Josie a trail to follow. By the following morning, she had traced each authorization attached to it through the palace records. Lord Garrick's name appeared exactly where she expected it to appear, beneath the recommendation supporting temporary relocation of the princess. Tristan read the document over her shoulder. Garrick, look at the order. His eyes narrowed. Garrick's signature authorized the recommendation, but the original transfer request had already been entered before his approval was attached. Someone had begun the process first and used Garrick afterward to make it look legitimate. He isn't leading this, Josie said. That doesn't make him innocent. No, it makes him useful to someone. Garrick had prejudice, influence, and enough certainty in his own beliefs to challenge a queen publicly. Someone else had turned those qualities into weapons. Josie added his authorization to the growing collection of documents. The question was no longer who wanted her removed. It was who understood the palace well enough to make other people remove her for them. Her supervised visit with the twins came that afternoon. Vito reached her first, colliding with her skirts hard enough that she nearly lost her balance. Theon followed more slowly. Josie crouched and pulled them both close. For several minutes, politics disappeared. Then Theon stiffened. Josie felt it before she understood why. His attention had moved past her shoulder. Royal Steward Corvin stood near the nursery entrance reviewing the household records with an attendant. Josie knew Corvin, as everyone in the palace did. He administered staffing, record circulation, and countless ordinary mechanisms that kept royal life functioning. A silver clasp fastened his coat. The same engraved symbol. Theon stared at it. Then he moved closer to Josie. Not panic. Recognition. Corvin glanced toward them. Josie smiled politely. Steward, Your Majesty. Nothing in his expression changed. That was almost more unsettling. Josie looked down at Theon and deliberately redirected his attention to the carved animals beside him. But inside, pieces shifted. Council records. Nursery administration. Staff access. Corvin occupied the narrow space where all three overlapped. It still was not proof. When the visit ended, Josie returned directly to Tristan. I know who I think it is. He stood. She told him about Corvin, about Theon's reaction, about the silver clasp, about the administrative access. Tristan reached for the bell that would summon guards. Josie covered it with her hand. You promised me. I promised to trust you. I did not promise to leave a man who may be targeting my sons free inside my palace. If we take him now, what do we have? A clasp? Theon's reaction? Access he legitimately possesses because he's royal steward. Tristan's jaw tightened. Then we question him. And if he has prepared this carefully enough, he'll give us nothing. She placed Garrick's authorization before him. Corvin used someone else to make the public attack. If we're right, he has spent all this time avoiding being the person visibly responsible. Tristan studied her. What do you propose? Josie knew he would hate the answer. I leave. His expression went blank. Publicly? No. The court already believes our marriage is failing. I've relinquished guardianship. The next believable step is that I decide there is nothing left for me here. Absolutely not. Corvin needs the twins moved for some reason. If he believes I'm leaving, he'll think the obstacle is gone. You are not an obstacle. You are their mother. The words struck her harder than she expected. Josie steadied herself. Then trust their mother. Silence. Tristan turned away, hands braced against the table. This gambit began with rumors, he said. Then you gave up access to the boys. Now you want to put yourself outside my protection. I want Corvin to believe that. And if he stops believing? Josie had no comforting answer. Finally, Tristan faced her. We do this together. Yes. No more keeping suspicions from me. No more. And if the children move, I know before they leave the family wing. Josie nodded. That evening, the palace received the next piece of the performance. Josie allowed word to spread that she intended to leave after the council's final hearing. She did not announce a destination. She did not defend herself. She simply began behaving like a queen preparing to disappear from court. The reaction came faster than she expected. Near midnight, Tristan entered her rooms carrying a transfer order. His face told her everything. They changed the schedule. Josie took the paper. The request to relocate Vito and Theon had originally allowed time for formal council approval. That requirement had been bypassed. The princes were now scheduled to leave under protective escort before dawn. Josie's blood went cold. Corvin. No signature. Of course not. She. Read the order again. Someone had decided the window was closing. Someone believed the disgraced wolfless queen was leaving. The Alpha King was politically constrained, and the heirs were finally available to move. Josie looked toward the dark windows. Her gambit had worked, and for the first time since it began, she wished it hadn't. Because whoever was moving the twins no longer intended to wait for the council. The plan had been simple only while it remained a plan. The twins would leave under the approved escort. Guards loyal to Tristan would follow without interfering. Whoever had manipulated the transfer would have to reveal where the boys were actually meant to go, and Corvin, or the person Josie still had to admit might stand behind him, would finally be connected to the scheme. Before dawn, Josie waited in a darkened room overlooking the inner courtyard. The escort assembled below. 2 covered wagons. Mounted guards. The twins were brought from the family wing. Even from above, Josie recognized Vito's resistance. He twisted in an attendant's arms, reaching back toward the palace. Theon did not struggle. He simply disappeared into the first wagon without making a sound. Josie's fingers tightened around the window frame. Tristan stood behind her. Our men are in position. She nodded. Neither of them liked allowing the wagons through the gate, but they needed the transfer to begin. The escort departed. Minutes passed. Then a guard entered at a run. Your Majesties. Josie turned. The route changed. Her stomach dropped. What? A second order reached the escort outside the eastern gate. Royal authorization. The wagons were separated. Tristan was already moving. Stop them. We've lost sight of the second group, Your Majesty. Josie's carefully constructed trap collapsed in a single sentence. She seized the forged order the guard carried. Different route. Different escort assignments. Someone had anticipated surveillance. They knew, Tristan said. Josie stared at the page. No, not necessarily. They had prepared for interference. That was worse. We need the army, Tristan said. Josie looked at the departure times. By the time soldiers searched every possible road, the twins could be anywhere. This is my fault. Tristan turned sharply. No, I gave them the opening. You gave us a chance to expose them. And now our sons are missing. The words hurt because they were true. A messenger arrived from the council almost immediately afterward. The nobles had learned that the heirs had left the palace. Tristan's presence was demanded before panic became a succession crisis. Josie watched the conflict cross his face. If he abandoned the council now, Corvin's allies could use his absence as further proof that the throne was unstable. If he stayed, someone else would search for his children. Tristan tore the summons in half. Let them call me compromised. He ordered every available loyal guard onto the roads. Josie caught his arm. Wait. She forced herself to think past fear. 2 wagons had left. Vito hated confinement. He kicked doors, struck walls, shouted, fought anyone trying to hold him. Theon did the opposite. When frightened enough, Theon became silent. She remembered the separation. Vito's protests echoing through corridors. Theon's quiet refusal to sleep. If they're trying to hide the boys, she said, they would separate them. Tristan understood immediately. One noisy child could draw attention. Josie went with the search party before anyone could argue. Outside the eastern gate, the road divided through wooded country. Fresh wheel marks appeared on both routes. The first trail showed signs of hurried travel. The second looked almost ordinary. Too ordinary. Josie dismounted near a narrow turn and walked beside the tracks. Nothing. Then she saw marks along the lower wooden edge of a roadside barrier where a wagon had passed too close. Scratches. Repeated. Low. Vito would have been fighting the walls. But if Vito had been in that wagon, the escort following it would have heard him. Unless the quiet wagon carried Theon. Josie pointed down the narrower road. That one. They followed. Farther ahead, fresh wheel tracks disappeared toward an abandoned service route screened by trees. A covered wagon stood beyond them. Josie saw no royal markings, no council escort, only men positioned around it. The trap was no longer controlled. Tristan and the larger guard force were still approaching from behind. Josie could wait. She should wait. Evidence mattered. Corbin had built everything through documents and intermediaries. If they caught the entire exchange, they could destroy the scheme completely. Then a small hand appeared against the wagon's rear opening. Thean. Josie stopped thinking about evidence. She moved. The guards with her followed as she crossed the trees. A man shouted. The wagon lurched. Josie reached it before it could gain speed and pulled open the rear door. Thean stared at her. His face crumpled. Josie. She climbed inside and gathered him against her. For one heartbeat, relief erased everything. Then someone outside ordered the wagon stopped. The door opened again. Royal Steward Corvin stood there. No silver clasp this time. No administrative papers. No polite distance. Only the calm expression of a man whose carefully arranged plan had finally been forced into the open. You should have left the palace when you had the chance, he said. Josie tightened her arms around Thean. Where is Vito? Corvin's gaze settled on the child she held. Safe, for now. Josie's blood chilled. Corvin looked almost disappointed. You still think this was about removing you? Behind Josie, Thean clutched her dress. Corvin stepped closer. The queen was never the prize. His eyes moved to the alpha heir in her arms. The princes were. Corvin watched Josie absorb the words with the patience of a man who believed the game had already ended. The princes were never in danger from the council, he said. Not while they remained useful. Thean pressed his face against Josie's shoulder. Josie kept one hand over the back of his head. Useful for what? Continuity. Corvin almost smiled. Kings die. Councils change. But heirs can be governed. The answer pulled every scattered piece into place. The altered guardianship decree. The attack on her fitness. The deliberate separation. The transfer request. Even Garrick. You used him. Garrick required very little encouragement. He genuinely believes you weaken the throne. Corvin's contempt was quiet. That made him perfect. Josie understood now. The old guardianship provision had never been designed merely to remove an unsuitable caregiver. If the heirs lacked a recognized maternal guardian and the reigning alpha could be declared compromised by personal loyalty to that guardian, temporary custody could pass under council authority. Regent custody. Corvin had not needed Tristan dead. He had not needed the twins dead. He needed two living heirs separated from the two people who would never surrender control of their future. You wanted Tristan to fight the council over me. I expected him to, so you could call him compromised. And when you surrendered guardianship yourself, you saved us considerable time. The words should have made Josie feel foolish. Instead, something else became clear. Corvin had misunderstood the most important move she had made. You think I surrendered them because I was beaten. You surrendered because you finally understood you had no legitimate claim. No. Josie looked down at Thean. I surrendered because they mattered more than my claim. For the first time, Corvin's composure shifted. A shout sounded outside. One of Josie's guards. Then another. Corvin reached toward the wagon door. At the same instant, the horses jerked violently. The wagon tilted. Thean slipped from Josie's arms toward the open side. A leather document case fell from Corvin's grasp and burst open on the ground outside. Papers scattered across the road. Josie saw seals. Signatures. Records. Proof. Everything they had needed. Then Thean screamed. Josie did not hesitate. She threw herself toward him, caught his tunic, and pulled him against her as the wagon rocked again. Behind them, papers disappeared beneath hooves and wheels. Weeks of evidence crushed into mud. Josie barely looked. She curled around Thean until the wagon stopped moving. Then Tristan's voice tore through the chaos. Josie. He came through the trees with royal guards behind him. Corvin tried to retreat, but the men surrounding the wagon were already being contained. Tristan reached Josie first. Thean. Safe. Vito. Another group of guards appeared farther down the service road. Between them was Vito. The moment he saw Josie, he broke free and ran. She dropped to her knees. Vito struck her with enough force to nearly knock her backward. Thean wrapped himself around her from the other side. For several seconds there was no council, no throne, no evidence. Only four people who had nearly been separated. Corvin's voice cut through them. You have nothing. He stood between two guards, muddy but composed again. The queen interfered with a lawful transfer. The king abandoned his counsel. You have destroyed whatever documents you imagined proved otherwise. Tristan started toward him. Josie rose. No. Corvin looked at her. Josie remembered the false seal, the altered decree, the recovered ledger, Garrick's signature added after the transfer request, the guards who had received conflicting orders, the attendants who could testify to the separation and unauthorized movement. Corvin had built his scheme so no single document condemned him. But he had created a chain. You needed everyone to perform one small legal act, Josie said. Garrick challenged me. Someone altered guardianship language. Someone removed the nursery entry. Someone initiated the transfer before Garrick approved it. Then someone changed the route. Corvin's expression tightened. You hid behind each person because none of them knew the entire plan. Tristan understood. Witnesses. Josie nodded. And records that still exist in more than one archive. The perfect evidence was gone. Enough remained. At the reconvened council, Corvin invoked the guardianship provision exactly as Josie expected. This time Garrick looked less certain when he learned his authorization had been attached after the transfer process began. The guards testified about contradictory orders. The recovered ledger established unauthorized preparation. The forged decree established manipulation of procedure. Together, the pieces exposed what no single document could. Corvin had attempted to manufacture the conditions for regent custody and place the heirs under a structure he could control. When the chamber finally fell silent, Tristan stood. But he did not declare Josie mother of the princes by royal command. Instead, he looked at her. After everything this family has cost you, he said, I will not decide for you again. Josie's throat tightened. Do you still choose us? Before she could answer, Vito escaped the attendant beside him. He ran across the council floor. Theon followed. Both boys reached Josie before anyone could stop them. Vito seized her hand. Theon wrapped his arms around her waist. The council watched. Josie looked at Tristan. She had once waited for a king to tell her she had value. She had once believed a palace could grant belonging. Now she understood why Corvin's plan had ultimately failed. He had treated family as a legal position that could be emptied and reassigned. Josie knew better. Yes, she said. Not because she had nowhere else to go. Not because Tristan was king. Not because the council would recognize her. She placed one hand on Vito's shoulder and the other over Theon's. I choose you. Tristan crossed the chamber and stood beside them. Only then did the council restore Josie's guardianship on the royal record. The title came after the choice. Exactly where it belonged. The palace did not return to normal after Corvin fell. Josie would not have trusted any piece that arrived that easily. The surviving records were reviewed, the conflicting authorizations traced, and the succession procedures that had allowed one steward to move information between council archives and the family wing were dismantled. No single official would again control both guardianship records and access to the heirs. Garrick remained on the council, but something in him had changed. He no longer looked at Josie as though her presence were the kingdom's greatest danger. Perhaps discovering that his certainty had made him useful to someone else had accomplished what argument never could. Josie did not ask Tristan to punish every noble who had supported the petition against her. She asked for something harder. No royal child should become evidence in a political argument simply because they're frightened, attached, grieving, or different from what a council expects. Tristan studied the proposal she placed before him. Independent review. Before anyone can use a child's behavior to remove a guardian. His mouth curved slightly. You're changing the law that was used against you. I'm changing the part that could be used against them. That was the difference. Once, Josie would have wanted the court to admit it had been wrong about her. Now she wanted to make certain being wrong could not hurt another family so easily. The reform passed. Not unanimously. Josie preferred it that way. A unanimous court might simply have been afraid of Tristan. A divided court that debated her proposal and still adopted it meant something had actually changed. That night, after Vito and Theon were asleep, Josie found Tristan alone beside the nursery windows. For once, he was not reading reports or issuing orders. He was simply watching the boys sleep. I almost ruined everything, Josie said. Tristan turned. The gambit worked. Too well. She looked toward the beds. I thought if I controlled enough pieces, I could control the danger. Then someone changed one order, and suddenly Theon was in that wagon and Vito was somewhere I couldn't see. Tristan came closer. I wanted to stop you several times. I noticed. I thought protecting you meant standing between you and every threat. Josie looked up at him. And now I think sometimes it means standing beside you while you make a decision I hate. She laughed softly. That sounds terrible. It was. His hand found hers. But next time, we plan together before my wife decides to sacrifice her position, leave the palace, and use our children as bait for a conspiracy. Josie's smile disappeared. Agreed. There was nothing romantic about how close they had come to losing the twins. She would not pretend otherwise. No more gambits that depend on everything going exactly as expected, she said. Good. You're still allowed to look murderous. Excellent. Weeks later, the succession acknowledgement was held again. The same great hall had been prepared. The same royal banners hung above the council. Even some of the same nobles stood in the same places. But Josie was different. She entered beside Tristan without wondering whether anyone believed she belonged there. Vito and Theon stood ahead of them in ceremonial clothes they clearly considered personal insults. The proceedings began. Names were read. Oaths were spoken. Then too many counselors began speaking at once over a procedural question. Vito frowned. Theon looked toward the noise. Josie saw the familiar tension enter their small bodies. Once, the entire palace had measured these children by whether someone could stop their crying. Then the council had tried to measure Josie's worth by whether they could stand without her. Both questions had been wrong. Vito stepped out of the ceremonial line. A court attendant instinctively moved to stop him. Tristan raised one hand. The attendant froze. Vito crossed the hall at a determined run. Theon followed. This time there was no panic. No desperate screaming. No frightened struggle. They simply knew where they wanted to go. Josie crouched as they reached her. Vito threw his arms around her neck. Theon took her hand. For a moment, the great hall became completely silent. Josie remembered another silence long ago, when two inconsolable babies had first gone quiet in her arms, and everyone had wondered what impossible thing had happened. She had wondered too. She had thought being needed might finally prove she was worth something. She knew better now. The twins did not give her worth. Tristan did not give her worth. The crown did not give her worth. But they had become her family because, again and again, when choice had carried a cost, they had chosen one another. Josie kissed Vito's hair and squeezed Theon's hand. Then she stood. One boy remained tucked against each side of her. Across the hall, nobles lowered their heads. Tristan did not command them. Josie did not need him to. She looked down at the two alpha heirs who had once been used to question whether she belonged beside them. Neither child cared what the council had decided. They had made their decision long ago. And as Josie stood beneath the royal crest with Tristan approaching to join them, no one in that hall needed to be told who she was. The servant who had once entered the royal nursery only when others allowed it was gone. The woman standing openly before the kingdom had nothing left to prove. She was their mother. She was Tristan's chosen partner. And she was the Alpha Queen.